Are there, Madam City Clerk, are there any changes to the agenda?
Not tonight, Mayor.
Okay. Do we have a closed session report, Mr. City Attorney?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, on December 15th, the last regular meeting, there was no reportable action. At the special meeting of December 29th, we reported that the council authorized legal action against Caltrans to challenge their legal sufficiency as to their California Environmental Quality Act analysis regarding the Binney Junction Road project. That action was presented to the clerk for filing in Yuba County this afternoon.
Thank you. Okay, we are now come to the Community and Consent Calendar Forum. Individuals wishing to address the City Council concerning consent calendar items or on matters not already on the agenda are invited to make oral comments of up to 3 minutes. Please raise your hand via Zoom. When you're called on by the City Clerk, you will be unmuted and you can address the City Council. Please state your name clearly for the audio recording. You are requested to address your comments to the Mayor and Council and not to the audience. By state law, the Council is not permitted to undertake any action or discussion on any item not appearing on the posted agenda. If you have any documentation that you would like to be distributed to the Council, please mail it to the City Clerk at 526 C Street, Marysville, 95901. And City Clerk, do we have any public comment?
Not at this time, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, we are now at the consent calendar. All matters on the consent agenda are considered routine and are therefore approved by one motion unless a council member or the city manager first requests that a matter be removed from the consent agenda for separate discussion and action.
Second.
We have a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor? Okay, the action calendar. All matters in this section of the agenda are discussed and will be acted on individually. Members of the public may request to speak on any of these items for up to 3 minutes when the mayor calls for public comment. Please raise your hand via Zoom. When you're called on by the city clerk, you'll be unmuted and you can address the city council. Please state your name clearly for the audio recording. If you have any documentation you'd like distributed to the council, please mail to the city clerk, 526 C Street, Marysville, 95901. Okay, as to the first item, consideration of potential programs for inclusion in the State Community Block Grant Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. Application recommendation. Pass a motion to 1, review the outcome per council directive, 2, confirm program selection, and 3, direct staff to make application for the economic development program and bring back a sub-recipient agreement and resolution for application to the council for approval. Mr. Palazzo.
Yeah, I'd just like to introduce Lori Adams. She's will present this item via Zoom to the City Council this evening.
Thank you. Ms. Adams.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Microphone on.
I want to provide a little bit of background for the pleasure of the council and the new members of the City Council. There has been some activity on this particular program and projects related to this program prior to some of you taking your seats. So if that's okay with you, I'm going to go ahead and start a little bit before the memo that's in front of you in your packet. The Department of Housing and Community Development, which is also known as HCD, and it's the state of California governing body for CDBG funds. CDBG funds are also called Community Development Block Grant Funds. And these are funds that are allocated from HUD to the state, and then application is made to the state normally through a competitive process, but for these funds, it's non-competitive, for programs and activities allowed pursuant to the congressional federal regulations. The CARES Act funding that has been allocated by Congress that has selected CDBG as one of the groups that will allocate funds out to the communities to reach the citizens that are in need. With that, CDBG has a very limited scope of work and activity list that we're allowed to operate with. So the council was charged with figuring out exactly what we need to apply for based on the needs within the city of Marysville. Now, these funds all stay within the city limits of Marysville, and so the programs and projects that are defined will specifically be expended on those needs that are identified. So the council directed staff to focus on looking for ways to assist businesses, and they also directed us to reach out to see if there were potentially some tutoring programs that might be available for the children of the community who are displaced from school. So we went out and made contact with the Economic Development Committee or Commission that serves Yuba and Sutter County. Had some very robust and in-depth conversations about the funding and how it could be utilized, to the end result that they had determined they had other funding sources that would probably better fit the needs that were identified within the community. And the tutoring program was not one that we were able to find an administrator for or an active program that the city could participate with. And then we reached out to some of the other nonprofits within the Yuba County area that provide services within the city limits, because that is a somewhat of a constraint on the different things that you can fund. And we made contact with Freed, and in your packet you have a letter from Freed outlining several different programs that they were able to provide us some outline on how they would serve the community. And I believe that we have Anna available. If you have questions for her, Anna will be able to answer those questions related to the programs that she's outlined. So here this evening, and as a part of this process, we now need to really focus in on what the pleasure of the council is based on the needs of the community and how we would like to allocate these funds to a program or a service activity to support the citizens in the city of Marysville. The total amount of your award that you have been provided, I actually flipped off that page, sorry, hold on one second, is $416,772 that can be used for programs currently. And that is a non-competitive dollar amount. Now, the other thing that CDBG does when they provide assistance to communities is they allow for the administration costs of those funds to be a part of the funding allocation. So 13% of the funds that have been allocated can be used for administration. Administration is quite robust. You have quite a few tasks that you are kind of saddled with in your contract with HCD for these funds. And it does require the staff to take note of the hours that they spend, but some of that is reimbursable. It also assists you with my contract because I am tasked for you to make sure that all of the program dollars are expended properly with the contract that you would have with the service provider that you choose. And we make sure that they meet all of the requirements that are outlined in the contract with the state and all of the federal regulations that are attached to these funds. So that gives you, I think, a pretty good background of kind of where we've been and where we're at tonight. So the review tonight, again, is to discuss what you have in front of you as the options. Freed is the only one that has provided us some options on programs for implementation. And then we can further discuss those, do a question answer, and then hopefully work towards identifying how you would like to allocate these funds for your community.
Okay, where do we go from here?
I have a couple questions, Mr. Mayor.
Proceed.
Sure.
I vaguely remember, I'm having a hard time recalling what we discussed on this last time, but was there not some discussion on doing some road rehabilitation or sidewalks or something in neighborhoods that heavily needed some work?
So that's a part of the Cdbg program, but that's a part of the competitive and over-the-counter program. Your application for those particular improvements is still in the list with Cdbg, and we're just waiting for them to fund down that list to your project application. So this particular application is specifically related, or this specific dollar amount of the $416,000 is specifically related to the COVID impacts and the CARES Act funds that have been allocated by Congress.
So can you give us some possibilities of where we can use it? Because I'm a little concerned. I'm not fully aware of the areas we can use the money.
Yeah, if I can,
Sure,
what have you got
absolutely.
teed up? Excuse me, what have you got teed up, and do you have a priority in mind to present to us?
So attached to your memo is a letter from Freed, Marysville COVID-19, and it's a proposal. And this was submitted to us by Freed based on outreach that we conducted in order to find service providers that could actually perform the activities that were out there. One of the complications of this is that you either have to use your own staff to implement these programs, or you have to work with a nonprofit organization to implement the programs. Based on your current resources, our task was to find a nonprofit organization that would meet the requirements of the program. And that's where we did our outreach. And then Freed was the only one that provided us a proposal. And they, in this proposal, have given us, I believe, there are 3 options here. The first, I'm sorry, no, there's 2 options here. The first option is going to be a Dine at Home program. And Anna, please jump in anytime if I make an error here. It's a Dine at Home program, and it's, oh, I'm sorry.
Can you hear me? This is Gene. Hello?
I can kind of hear you.
Okay. Anyway, let me kind of back up for a second, because I'm maybe clear up a little confusion on Vice Mayor Buttiglioli's question and this program and what we can spend these monies on. CDBG has different, I don't see, buckets of money that are out there. We've applied in a different program for the street funding. This particular bucket is the COVID Relief Fund Act, dollars that are coming to cities that are basically not competitive. The money's there if we can fit into one of CDBG boxes on its use. It's a lot more difficult because a lot of the programs that are outlined in CDBG aren't necessarily in cities' wheelhouses of kind of what we do, the more of the social service aspects of providing benefits to the community, which typically lie under county purview. So in this, we've struggled quite a bit on trying to, one, partner with an organization And that's why we reached out to the Economic Development EDC, their administration or what the C stands for, to see if they could do some business loans and all that. It didn't really kind of fit with the reporting requirements and everything that they, I guess, had set up. So we reached out to other nonprofits. Freed, floated to the top, and for the city, it's important to get some organization out there to administer these funds because they have the resources and the staff. We just don't have that capability and staff to do this. So it's real important for us to get a sub-recipient. So we reached out to them to see how can you help provide services to the community under the guidelines. And Lori, maybe you can take a step back and talk about those guidelines because they want the money to go to services that benefit kind of COVID impacted businesses, residents, and what Freed has outlined is some voucher programs for businesses on individuals that may have been impacted that lost their jobs that need they get a voucher to go to a restaurant to get dinner, that type of thing. The other component that Freed is proposing is benefits rehabilitation to a home. If you're impacted by COVID, you need some rehabilitation to your house. We can go out there and kind of do a rehabilitation project, for that residence, and that's kind of like similar to CDBG's rehab, housing rehab type program. So it's really difficult to kind of fit this COVID funding CDBG source into some programs in our city. So, maybe Lori, can you touch on some other
Sure.
Ideas that we've kind of researched and kind of pursue on this funding?
Sure. And as Jean mentioned and I mentioned, this is a very narrow program. So other things that you can do are provide funding for food banks to assist with the influx of needs. You can support homelessness and you can support the ability to house them and provide temporary relocation housing for those individuals. And that's where the component of the city limits becomes somewhat of a challenge because those are more of a county or a regional type of an impact. And it makes it a little more difficult to work a program within the city limits for city residents in a sense. You can work on facilities and infrastructure improvement projects that are related to providing medical facilities or extension of medical facilities and needs. You can work on, we had one community expand their community center kitchen to assist the Meals on Wheels program to increase their productivity of meals for seniors because they had a significant increase because those individuals were not able to leave their homes. We have the public service components, one of which Freed has provided in this, which is also looking to bridge the gap of persons who are disabled or seniors who aren't able to leave their home to receive hot meals. So that there was a voucher program that they have put forth to assist with local restaurants providing hot meals to those individuals. We have another community, and one of the ideas that we had discussed was a tutoring program for children. It also assisted in providing some of the equipment. We had a school bus that was equipped to allow for a Wi-Fi mobility in areas that had issues attaining Wi-Fi. So that, it's all related to COVID and the limitations that families are seeing or the impacts that they're seeing. Another one that has been really popular is rental and mortgage assistance to members of the community that have had a reduction in hours and income due to COVID, and assistance with up to 3 months of mortgage payments, rental payments, and utility payments is another program that we have implemented.
So I kind of jump back in here, and then I'm going to sit down. So it's very difficult to kind of put these monies in that box for us to administer and work, because a lot of this cumbersome. CDBG does require a lot of reporting, once we receive the money and spend the money. So we're trying to figure out, something that partnership that can be a subrecipient that is capable of working with us and doing those reporting requirements, and something that fits the needs of the city. Dollars are out there. If we can't fit those dollars within the city, we don't necessarily have to apply. We don't have to necessarily apply for all of those dollars. Those dollars go roll back into the CDBG program to other communities that may have a different need than we do. But what we're trying to do is just find that partner that we can get some of these dollars into our community and hopefully help our residents and businesses.
To the chair, I want a question, but before Gene. So it sounded, it was already stated that the project managing of this can be included in that money, right? So it'll be, if we can find somebody, we can reach out of the city to have somebody do it. So that, I'm just answering myself, I guess, on that. But how actually and maybe this is not a question for you, but how does the outreach work on this type of a project?
Outreach as in?
To the community.
Thank you.
Once we put these in place, how do we get it out to the community for the need?
Yeah, if you'd like, I don't mind answering that. This is Anna Acton with Freed Center for Independent Living. Great question. I want to just back up for one moment to say that food access has been one of the top priorities and needs of people in the community during COVID-19, especially those who are at risk for complications related to COVID. That includes younger individuals with maybe health conditions that put them at risk, or older adults. So in response to that, we reached out to Yuba and Sutter County, encouraging them to implement something called the Great Plates program, which was FEMA reimbursed. The counties decided not to go forward with that program. And so in response, we started working with other CARES Act funding with the Agency on Aging Area 4 and Freed. We are an emerging aging and disability resource connection for Yuba and Sutter counties, including Marysville. And we started putting our heads together and resources together to implement the Dine at Home program. The Dine at Home program is directly in response, addresses the issues that you've brought up as a council, is my understanding, about supporting local businesses during COVID and the shutdown, as well as supporting people during stay-at-home orders who are most at risk, frankly, from dying from COVID. So the program currently is working with 5 local restaurants. We are in negotiation with a couple of additional restaurants, and we are trying to braid together funding to serve more individuals. It's really a win-win because the local restaurants get a fair reimbursable rate for a meal. People get healthy meals that are already prepared, and it helps them with the stay-at-home orders. So our outreach for this program, frankly, there are many ways we can outreach. But because of our current limited funding, we're already at max and we're already at capacity because it's a fairly costly program to run, because we're basically paying for prepared food, at restaurants. And so currently there's about 41 individuals in Marysville who are being served. We've capped the program where we're not taking on any new individuals, and our current CARES Act funding will run out by June 30th if we're lucky to make it that far. And we think we can easily serve 50 to 60 people. My proposal, it all depends on the amount of funding that's available. Our current proposal is to make sure we continue serving another about 40 individuals for the next 2 years, because we expect this will drag on, especially those who are most at risk, also helping support those local businesses, the restaurants, and trying to maintain this program over the 2-year period that is afforded under this funding source.
One last question, Mr. Mayor, and I'm done. Is there a percentage of the funding that can be used for the project managing? So we kind of have a control of how much goes to the project managing and how much actually goes, to funding, as in the restaurant type issues you're talking about.
So the program would provide a budget outline that would be a part of the application, and that would be approved by the council.
But the funding to administration cannot exceed what you said earlier, 13%.
Oh, yeah. Okay, that's what I was looking for. Sounds good. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Actually, let me clarify that, Gene. So 13% is the amount that the city would retain for administration. And then the budget that Anna would provide would include the salaries and operational costs for the implementing the activity within her budget, which is a part of the activity.
So the 13% is for Adams Ashby working with the city to administer, and then also city staff time, finance, department, tracking, monitoring, reporting to the Cdbg, and then out of the other funds, there will be a cap on what Freed can use for administration funds. Is that right? Would that be correct?
Or is it just on a quote?
Submit a budget. Yeah, they would submit a budget that would outline what their needs would be to implement the program.
So correct me on this, Lori. Our next step in the process, if we get direction from the council to move forward, we would come back to the next council meeting with the program and the budget for Freed that would be adopted by the council. So, and we would submit that to Cdbg as our project.
That is correct.
Okay. So, and the NOFA to Cdbg was just released, and when is that NOFA due?
The application for programs is due February 12th.
So our timing is starting to shrink, and there's going to be a lot of information that Lori's going to have to put together with Freed if we move forward with Freed to get that application together to get it submitted to Cdbg.
Councilman Belzer, you had a comment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to Gene or Lori, whoever has or maybe both. But on this 13%, I think it's $54,000 roughly. In your guys' opinion, is that enough to cover what an estimated admin cost is going to be on this, or are we thinking it's going to be more like $100,000 in admin costs? I mean, are we even in the ballpark with 13%? We're gonna have to come out of pocket and pay for more.
I'm going to have Lori answer that. She knows these programs a lot better than I.
Yeah, it would be an adequate amount.
It would be, okay.
Yes.
So there are two, thank you. There are, Ms. Adams, there are two layers of overhead as I understand it. The overhead prescribed, the 13%, and then whatever overhead is incurred by the facilitating agency?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. What would you expect the total overhead load to be? About 25% probably?
Anna, do you have an idea of what that would be? I know that's putting you on the spot a little bit, but
it
it would be
depends
your
on
operational costs.
Yeah, it depends on what you put in the category of administrative overhead. We take a 10% indirect administrative cost, but that does not include salaries. We would want to hire a person to administer the program. So it depends on what you include in your administrative rate.
Thank you. Now, I presume different activities bear a different overhead burden. For example, if you're dealing with lots of recipients, you're probably going to have more overhead. Is that a correct assumption?
Correct, because to do any program like this, it takes the person to work directly with each individual person to develop a goal and a plan and to administer those vouchers, collect them back from restaurants, and then reimburse the restaurants for the vouchers they've collected. So that's where we need the staffing time. But yes, you are correct.
I have no problem with the objectives, in generally speaking, the objectives outlined in the Freed proposal. However, they do seem to be within the orbit of general welfare, which is primarily the orbit of the county, as I recall. Gene, am I correct there?
I don't disagree with that statement. Again, these fundings are a bit out of a city's wheelhouse. However, the programs that Freed have recommended go back into our businesses, go back into housing, which benefit the city.
Allow me to get to my point. In reading the legislation, or at least the summary of the legislation that has been provided on page 5, economic development is one of the targets of this money. And I don't see anything about economic development here. And I know there's a lot of businesses really suffering in Marysville. And again, you go to page 5 in economic development, that's business assistance to help businesses retain employees, or in the case of businesses restarting, related to shutdowns, adding employees. And then there's also micro enterprise assistance. Is it possible to do to do grants to businesses based on need to keep them alive?
And that's, Mayor, that's what we tried to pursue with economic development, Yuba-Sutter Economic Development Corporation. And they have other funding sources that they're using inside of Marysville for Marysville businesses to, assist them in that. The programs, that are presented, they do help businesses in the sense that it gets people to solicit, and purchase from those businesses. The economic development side of, housing rehab, would put, contractors, other workers, to do that those rehab programs.
I may. So we got stiff-armed, crude term, Economic Development Corporation declined. Do we know what they're doing in Marysville?
I'm going to defer to Ms. Adams. You had a little bit more conversations with the EDC than I did. Could you?
They do have funding available to these businesses, both grant and loan funds. I don't know the specific funding sources that they're using, but they do have funds available to the businesses in the city of Marysville through.
Perhaps you misunderstood me, or I misunderstood your response. The EDC has declined participation, and Mr. Palazzo just described their activities as including things involved in Marysville, and I'm just curious if they declined on this, what are they doing in Marysville? I'm curious.
I would have to request a report from them to answer that question for you. I'm sorry, I don't have that answer specifically.
I'm disappointed to hear that when business economic development seems to be a real challenge for Marysville, and these are nice things to do as outlined in the Freed proposal, but they don't address economic development, which is a really tough need. And again, the activities in the Freed proposal, again, seem to fall within the orbit of general welfare versus general welfare, and that is not a prime agenda item for the city. That's a prime agenda item for the county.
I'll reach out to Ms. Stranix at the EDC and get a report for the council.
Yeah, I'm really disappointed to hear that, and I'd be more interested. We don't want to miss this February 12th date to be able to get funds and do something, right? I think we're all in agreement there. It's just that I presume Freed specializes in the types of programs they're offering, and God bless them. I mean, they're doing the Lord's work. That said, I think economic development should not be overlooked in potential uses of these funds.
Mr. Mayor, may I just as we all will learn or have learned, this money is it's not restricted by anybody but the state. The state puts that money out, so it's restricted where it can be used. So it would be just an additional service that we could provide to get out there. I understand and I agree with you, the economic development is a more important issue in some senses, but this would be funding that we couldn't use no matter what. Also with the EDC, I had gotten a couple emails that just came in the last day or two from Brenda that they were offering the grant money. Just probably the last 2 days, maybe 3 days, did she approach with that stuff? Yes, I got the emails on that just the last couple days.
Well, I haven't seen those.
Oh, yeah, they did come from Brenda, so.
Well, I've just expressed one opinion, mine. Do you have anything to offer, Mr. Hudson?
So, I mean, EDC has pretty much saved the bacon of a lot of businesses here in the Yuba-Sutter area, and I appreciate the work that they're doing for my business. I understand it the way Gene and it was presented to us here. Just like you said, Councilman Butterfoley, these funds are pretty narrow-minded in what we can actually use them on. And it sounds as though that Freed is the only one that has kind of thrown their plate on the table for us to look at for being able to put the funds into. So that being said, I'm all for it in support of that. If the parameters are allowed to be opened up a little bit wider to maybe go towards GDC, which it sounded as though that is not applicable in this type of situation. So I say let's see if we can encumber these funds, and if they're specifically earmarked for this type of thing that Freed is doing, great. If we had a couple other plates on the table to look at, I'd be interested. But I mean, in regards to your remarks, EDC has done a wonderful thing for the businesses of the Yuba-Sutter area. And so if they decline to participate with these particular funds, maybe because it was too narrow-minded for what they're trying to do and too much work, I'm not sure. That's Brandon Stranix and EDC. I think that we should move forward unless we have another option on the table to be able to at least go after these funds and help out the food acquisition for people of homes and or nursing facilities and so forth. I think it's a good move.
Congressman, I mean, Councilman Gilchrist, you must have a comment.
Yeah, so once Freed establishes what their administrative costs would be, which could be 13 to 20%, we're looking at $200,000 for money to purchase warm meals, one of the options, access to food and nutrition. We would be purchasing meals from local businesses and provide those meals to people that have been affected by COVID, senior citizens, et cetera, that fit the requirements. And Freed would administer this, as well as the city. The city staff has a budget of 13% of the $400,000, and Freed would have a percentage. And so we're looking at $200,000 in additional money through this to do a few things. Is that correct?
Yes.
No. Yes. Okay. Okay.
Is there any limitation on which businesses they can approach? Are they restricted to locally owned, or can they go to Round Table Pizza, or how does that work?
Yeah, thank you very much for asking that. So currently we're working with 5 restaurants, only 2 of which are in Marysville currently. We are willing to work with any restaurant. We found the large chains not to be, not to work as well with us around this program. And for example, right now we have a 2 Bits and Tracy's Diner that we're working with. And so we like to work with the mom and pops, the small businesses, because as part of the program, we ask them to develop a nutritional menu that a person can purchase with their $10 voucher. And so each individual gets 20 vouchers a month. We had it more than that at one time, but we were running out of money so quickly that we went from 50 or so to 20 per month that we give to people. So, and then they can use them at the local restaurants. Be willing to work with other restaurants. We'll approach any restaurant that's interested. It's a fairly simple agreement, but there is the menu that they have to develop that basically is has good nutrition in it in order to work with us.
Through the chair. So, ma'am, correct me if I'm wrong, did I hear you say that they could have a nutritionally balanced meal for a $10 voucher, and that's what you're asking the restaurants to support?
Correct. We negotiate with the restaurant on a meal per voucher that meets Older Americans Act nutritional guidelines and that works for the restaurant. So each meal is around $10. Some are a little bit more, some are a little bit less. Some we negotiate delivery with them, which is more, and they'll deliver to people in the local vicinity. Those are the most popular restaurants, I'll be honest with you, those that are willing to deliver, because we're working with populations, you know, of people who don't have good access to transportation sometimes.
I'm just curious because I know that there's a few restaurants here in town that go out of their own profitability to donate food to, like, you know, first responders and the hospital staff and all that kind of stuff. But I wasn't quite sure of the stipulation of the voucher just being $10. And I understand the nutritionally balanced aspect of it. And it's generally when you purchase food, running a small restaurant, lower quality food for sure. Is that voucher expandable, or is that just what you guys have set within your corporation industry?
Yeah, we work with Agency on Aging Area 4 on that particular aspect of the program, and it's a negotiation with the restaurant to get to the actual dollar amount, the value of the voucher for that particular restaurant. There's no reason why we could not pay more per meal, but honestly, you know, it gets expensive. Frankly, I'm just going to be honest that it's really unfortunate that Yuba and Sutter counties did not implement the Great Plates program, because that's a similar type of program, yet they're paying like $16 per meal, basically. And it's really been great for the restaurant. So we try to leverage with what works for the restaurant and what we can work with our budget to try to serve as many people as possible.
Since you're still on the line, how can we be confident and be reassured that this funding stays in Marysville for Marysville businesses and doesn't go out to Yuba City restaurants or somewhere else? It sounds like you get these vouchers and you can use them at any restaurant that wants to participate in this, regardless of what side of the river they're on. And how do we keep those funds for Marysville businesses?
Yeah, the way the program is set up right now, we'll work with any restaurant in the vicinity, Yuba or Yuba City or Marysville. And we don't really have it designed in a way where we only give vouchers. The vouchers are good for any of the participating restaurants. So I'd have to think about how we would limit it. That would create a whole new kind of administrative new system for us, which I'm trying to avoid. I'm trying to focus on the residents of Marysville, getting access to healthy food. So this would only go to residents that live within city limits. And then if we could get more restaurants in Marysville to participate, that would be amazing and give people more options. But currently, the way the program is set up, the vouchers are good for any participating restaurant. And those,
Just
yeah.
Sorry to interject. Is the city of Yuba City participating in this grant? I mean, do they have their own grant that they've applied for and they're getting? Or are we going to be paying for the administration and be paying for the overhead of running this entire program, and then half of these funds end up over in the city of Yuba City and they benefit from it?
So I do need to make a clarification here, just to make sure that we stay within the federal regulations. Procurement and use of CDBG funds cannot be limited to just businesses in the city. It's limited to the city residents, but the procurement process, which would be recruitment of businesses to participate, would have to be open and fair. So therefore, it would be any restaurant in the area that would like to participate. So we aren't able to put that restriction on the funds. So
When you approach restaurants in Marysville and they decline participation, what is the reason for their pushback?
I mean, I think part of it is, they have to develop a menu that is compliant with Older Americans Act funding. And Freed started this program and negotiated with restaurants many years ago and then handed it over to Area 4, the Area 4 Agency on Aging, who has been doing that part of this program for us. So I actually don't know what the current reasons are. I don't feel comfortable saying, because I don't have that knowledge at the moment. Right now, we just have Two Bits Express, Two Bits Cafe, Linda's, Las Brasas, Tracy's Diner, and 2 more currently in negotiation is what Area 4 has told me, but I don't know where those 2 restaurants are, but we're willing to work with any restaurant.
To the chair. So what, if I'm understanding right, the participant or the recipient has to be in Marysville, but the restaurant does not have to be in Marysville. Is that correct?
yes,
Correct.
that is correct.
Okay, and then one more question. So back at the expense of this program, we're looking at 13 to the city. There was a mention of 10% for the managing plus labor. So when we receive the quote on doing this, will it have built into it the labor cost? Because we're already at 23% and the labor is going to be the most expensive. So I'm guessing another 15 at least. So now we're up to 40% roughly of the 400,000 if I'm on the right track here.
I need to work the numbers to know how much you actually funding is available. Based on, say, a budget of $280,000, I would like to have a 0.5 FTE with benefits to administer the program, screening participants, distribute meal vouchers, support coordination of services, track vouchers, redeem them. And that would leave about $177,000 for the restaurants. And then there's some staffing for Area 4 administrative costs, as well as the Freed's administrative overhead and printing of the vouchers.
So no matter what the total amount is, let me go back and ask this question. When you give us a quote for running the program for us, will it be a complete package including all of the labor you're speaking of?
Correct. I'll lay it out completely as far as FTE, staffing, restaurant.
Everything will be in that quote.
Correct.
And am I close to assume that between our administration costs, your administration, and your outreach, we're going to be somewhere in the vicinity of 40 to 45%?
Hold on.
Roughly. I'm not trying to pin you down to
roughly.
cost.
Yeah. I wouldn't be
Okay.
surprised. 40.
Okay.
5%, somewhere around there.
Okay. Thank you.
You mentioned federal standards for the nutrition. There are federal standards, and that's what you say you have to adhere to?
We are currently using CARES Act funding for the program through Older Americans Act, as well as an independent living center, which is what Freed is. We received CARES Act funding. So the way the program has been designed and operated is we've had to ensure that it complies with Older Americans Act nutritional guidelines. The other programs that frankly, we could make it simpler, but because of the certain guidelines around Cdbg, for example, we can't just go and purchase gift cards, which would be amazing. I could just purchase a whole bunch of gift cards from local restaurants, give them out to people who need it. But the way the Cdbg funding is developed, it does not allow us to do that kind of activity, I believe is what Lori had said. So this ensures control. They get nutritious food and they can't buy alcohol. And that the money is actually going for food access purposes to those most at risk for COVID complications.
Any other comments?
Public.
Go ahead.
Public comment.
Oh, yeah, but time for public comment.
Right. Mayor, our first speaker will be Chuck Ferguson.
Welcome, Chuck.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. How you guys doing? I had a general question, to Lori, actually, would be the question. Nonprofits are the only ones that can participate in creating proposals for this? That's my question to Lori.
Yes, in order for the city to contract with a subrecipient, it must be a nonprofit organization or a quasi-governmental agency.
Does it have to be a 501c3, or perhaps could the chamber or a like type organization?
Yes, chambers are eligible to an extent, and some chambers are providing training.
How was the request for proposal sent out to the public? How do people find out about that so they can actually submit proposals?
We had a public hearing process that we had conducted, and then we did additional outreach based on some of the target areas that the council had identified as current high need situations. And which is when we did our outreach to the EDC and other organizations within the community.
Do you have a rough estimate on how many organizations you reached out to?
I do not. I would need to access our outreach information in order to answer that question. I don't have that with me.
So in my thought process, I'm curious if there's a way for, and of course I can't speak on behalf of the chamber, but if an organization such as the chamber were willing to take the funding and help distribute it to the businesses for the city of Marysville as an option, and leave the food and feeding stuff to Cal Fresh and Meals on Wheels and what have you. Some of the other programs that are already out there to help provide food to those less fortunate.
If I could respond to that quickly, Mr. Ferguson. One of the challenges with Cdbg economic development funds is that there are very strict requirements related to the programs and the underwriting capacity. And if the organization with these particular funds, it's not that they can't eventually come up to speed on the program, but with the CARES Act funding, the state is requiring the organization that implements the economic development component of the funding be someone who has a background and experience in working with underwriting through the Cdbg program. because it is very complex, and any error in this process that would potentially deem a business ineligible would then put the city on the hook for paying back those funds, which is why we had a very very robust and active conversation with the EDC in regards to providing these funds to them. And once we got through that process, and when they looked at the funding sources they had available to them in other areas, these funds are very cumbersome, and they were able to actually benefit businesses more effectively and more efficiently with funding sources they had in-house. So that's just to kind of give you a little bit of a background. Now, if the chamber is interested in developing a program like that, then we can certainly work on getting some grant funding to bring them up to speed and develop a program that they might be able to administer in the future using economic development funds through the Department of Housing and Community Development. Because having those resources and having multiple agencies kind of up to speed on how to implement, it definitely gets the money out faster to the community, because it's not just one organization kind of operating that program. And that is something that I think the chamber should pursue with the council in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Ferguson.
At this time, no further speakers, Your Mayor.
Thank you. Well, it sounds we're up against a time crunch, and there is a target that's been set up, and we know a lot more target, a facilitating agency that's been teed up for us. And with a plan, whether it be what we would all dream of or not, it is a plan that is worthy, and it's money that is going to go towards a good cause with a lot of overhead. So be it. So be it. Bruce.
This to Gene. So with the, let's say we go ahead and we're gonna, I think we all are, I agree, looking to see what this proposal will bring. But to look at the 13% that the city would get, is that a flat amount that then goes into our general fund, or do we have to then go back and provide some type of proof or legitimizing that we use that amount?
We need to report that, correct me if I'm wrong, Lori, on this one, to Cdbg in our reporting requirements. That 13% should cover the costs of Adams Ashby consultant group, to administer and do the reporting, and then also our costs, city staff costs. And we will, anytime we work on this project, we have to record it and document, the hour, time that we spent, why, and then that all gets reported to.
So we're not guaranteed a 13% comes back to the city. We don't use it, we don't get it.
Is that correct, Lori?
Yep, that is correct, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Well, we've beat this one pretty well into the ground.
I'd like to make a motion.
Mr. Hudson, please.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve going after this, and maybe we shoot something different next time. Does that meet what you need, Gene?
The agenda, let's see. Phase 2 and 3, confirm program selection, and direct staff to make application for the economic development program. Bring back a subrecipient agreement and resolution for application to the council for approval.
As stated, make a motion. Second.
We have a motion, a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks for the presentation, guys.
Yes, thank you very much.
You worked for it.
Thank you.
Now we move to agenda item number 3, request by Council Member Gilchrist and Vice Mayor Buttacavoli to discuss the roles and responsibilities of the Planning Commission. Gentlemen. Oh, Gene.
I queued up for Councilmember
Would you please?
It's a good topic. The city council, has appointed a seven-member planning commission. The planning commission, takes on the roles of reviewing, land use applications, permits that are required by our code, state law to be reviewed through that process. I provided the city council our ordinance on the planning commission along with the bylaws, and then also an expert from the League of California Cities that kind of outlines kind of the roles and those responsibilities to try and get that conversation started. And I'll turn it to Councilman Goodman.
Thank you. So, the beginning of the year, I wanted to make sure that we utilize the Planning Commission in order to fulfill our goals, the previous council's goals and the goals that we, the new council, will establish. So I requested, and Rebecca Cavoli, what's the status of the Planning Commission? How does it work? What can it do for us? And I was given all of the documentation, the most important one being the League of Cities and what the League of Cities suggests for a planning commission. And it's all very exciting. And so this is the beginning of the year. This is the first discussion of many discussions. And so I really have very little to say because it's up to the Planning Commission next to assist us in fulfilling our own goals as council. And one of the most important things that a Planning Commission does is general plan updates. And they do this in a public forum as well. And so I thought it would be great if we all got on board with the importance of the Planning Commission right away in the beginning of the year. And, I'm still learning, and yet all of the documents that are given to me make complete sense. And so I just want to make sure that we utilize our Planning Commission moving forward.
Chair. So, Stuart, four of us have been on the Planning Commission. I don't know if you have been on anything. So I understand your frustration a little bit coming from a Planning Commission point of view, not always understanding, what oversight they may or may not necessarily have. We have the bylaws in front of us and we have the city ordinances in front of us and so forth. And they're fairly clear cut. What is it you're looking to exactly change? You want to change bylaws? You want to change the city ordinances?
Yeah.
Or do you want to follow specifically what's coming from the League of Cities? Do they coincide? What is it you're asking us to consider right now?
So we need to come up with a plan for the city of Marysville, a cohesive plan that we can follow throughout the years. It's not a 4-year ad hoc plan. Every 4 years we start something new. We actually generate and create a plan for the growth of Marysville. And general plan updates, which, we've only done housing updates as required probably 3 times since 1985. We do not have a general plan update since 1985, a comprehensive one. So what that means is entities and agencies really don't have anything to follow. And so it's really important that we come up with a cohesive plan that the Planning Commission's designed to do, and implement them and use them. And the steps are very clear and it's really exciting. So we don't have a general plan update. We have housing and we have a few others. We don't have traffic. We don't have circulation, parking, many factors.
Not disagreeing with that, Stuart. I'm just saying is that, you brought this before us and it is an interesting topic because I'm kind of curious to see, but it is pretty much stated what the purpose of the Planning Commission is. The subcommittee is stated within their bylaws and our ordinances. What do you want to change?
Oh, no, thank you. I don't need to change anything at all. I just want to use it. I want to utilize the Planning Commission. And we have some great projects going on right now, and we're going to get into that later as we are with the previous council's existing goals, when I look at them, how to fulfill these goals. These come directly from the Planning Commission and not, for instance, an ad hoc committee or something like that. And in that way, the Planning Commission really handles the public input so that the public has something to say about the growth and the development of Marysville.
So again, and I appreciate you clarifying my question there. I agree that we should use the Planning Commission much more earnestly than what we have. And yes, we do got those problems, as you have stated. I know that, historically, when I was on the commission, it's been several years, that, regular meetings weren't happening on a regular basis. And so therefore we could have lack of cohesiveness, consistency, what was going on. That would be nice to see that change, and at least be able to have set goals given to them by us and the community development director and so forth, kind of go in that direction. I mean, good leadership is always an issue for me. And there was just some confusion over the years. So you're bringing this up for a conversation, saying what you would like us to do or what you'd like to see, or?
I wanted city staff to bring up everything the Planning Commission is about and make absolutely certain that we are following the League of Cities, et cetera. And so we just haven't. We really haven't. We didn't have, for instance, we didn't have the 5th Street project go through the plan. Did we? No. We did.
Yeah. Yeah.
So these should, these are very important aspects of running a city, and I'm not quite sure why we hadn't done it, really, especially when it comes to the general plan since 1985. But I can see so many opportunities where being proactive is a lot more financially feasible than being reactive. And so getting ahead, yeah.
Are you done?
Okay.
No, I'll just say why, so we don't get too far into this tonight, but why I had kind of tagged onto this a little bit just was I don't need anything changed. I just wanted it to be utilized. But in my mind, the reason when we were on it, I felt we were utilized. I believe that in the past couple of years, there was a very lack of using the planning, but that goes back to leadership. There was a very adversarial relationship, I know, with some of the economic development people, positions. So I think in this next move, and when we go into looking for a city manager, it might be a question that we want to bring up and see how they want to use that situation. And then just to respond lastly to Stuart's comment about the general plan, we've discussed the general plan ever since I've been on this. The problem is a general plan runs over $1 million, closer to $1.4 million, if I remember right. It was a big number. So, yeah. So that's why it's not done. Not that we don't need it. We absolutely need to update it. So I think what's happened is we've kind of skirted around to do it, kind of piecemeal it with the roads, with, transportation, with all the things, which may not be the best way, but to be able to come up with $1.4 million or $5 million to do that is going to be a challenge.
I don't think you're proposing to turn the Planning Commission into staff doing a general plan. Okay, thank you. They are, my understanding is they're a deliberative body and they deal with issues that are presented to them. And those issues are sent to us for final disposition. The thrust, though, that catches my attention most and positively is a plan for growth. And that is probably best facilitated as between the council and the commission with a city manager who's really focused on that as well. it takes the entire team, and we're not going to sit into planning commission meetings, and we don't burden them with sitting into our meetings. And so that objective, I think everybody embraces. It's just how it's done. Belza.
Thank you. You know, to kind of, so I'm probably the most frequent to the planning commission on here, so maybe I can give a little bit of a report just from experience and being involved, et cetera. I chaired it in 2019 and then sat on it last year. And so I think one of the biggest frustrations coming from the planning commission side of things in this past era that we were in was lack of communication between the council and the commission, and from the commission to the council. For example, it's in the code, and Brant, you and I had a number of conversations on the phone about the procedure of how you go about communicating and all these different things. But one of the things that's actually in the code and on the historical side of it is that the planning commission should create a historical list of our historical buildings and maintain it and then create public awareness. So there's a 3-phase to it. So this is an ongoing thing. However, part of the dilemma was that the planning commission itself, it was debated back and forth between staff and our council, and then also the planning commission, as to whether the planning commission could create its own ad hoc committees. Some council members would say that it could, some council would say that it could not, et cetera. There was just tons of frustrating dialogue. And so I think it's our duty to really set some clear, the planning commission is there at our discretion and for our pleasure, right? And so I'm in agreement that we need to set some clear direction. I think that it would be wise to start to have joint meetings periodically, not all the time, but have points of contact between the planning commission and the council. And I think that there's some things that the planning commission could be utilized on, as so long as it doesn't create more work for staff, right? We understand that staff is stressed to the max as it is, but I think that there's things that the planning commission could be working on, like parking studies. We've got some planning commissioners that are ready to go to work. They want to go to work and they want to help out and contribute. Why not send them out walking up and down D Street and C Street counting parking stalls? You know what I mean? It's not that big of a job, but I think they are underutilized, the planning commission is, and I would advocate for us to really grab a hold of that and use them more frequently than has been used in the past. So
the theme I'm hearing is greater communication between the commission and the council.
Yeah.
And that can be facilitated with an effective city manager.
I look at it like a tool in a toolbox that you don't use.
Well,
and it's a beneficial tool to the city.
And it's fair for the questions to be asked in each direction. What can they do for the council and the city? And what can the council do for them to help them achieve their goals? So it's all about communication and the objective, economic growth.
I think, I'd add to that, and I appreciate the previous council setting aside some funds in the budget to go towards training. We've got a deck of new planning commissioners, and I would say, even though we don't, I think the League of Cities, their training for planning commission is coming up soon. Is it March? February or March? Yeah, because we still have that funding in the budget for it, right? Right. Because that was, I know I went to that, and that was extremely beneficial. And I know, Brant, you do an orientation with the planning commission, et cetera. And so, but as many hours as we can get them down there to be educated, the better, because we do have 4 new planning commissioners. So, yeah. Key steps. Thank you.
Please, go ahead.
To give you an update, the planning commission, newly appointed, I forget the exact dates we're trying to set up, to do a 2-hour orientation, Brown Act, Robert's Rules, Public Records, and our attorney, Brent Wardson, will be presenting that to the commission at their first meeting in January. we'll be having kind of a planning commission 101, kind of going through the binders that they'll be distributed and walk them through, or consult Paul. Richardson will be presenting that to the planning commission. I'll attend both meetings in that support. So we're going to kind of get them up to speed. Take a little bit of time, get them to the trainings, at the league. We're going to strongly encourage all the commissioners attend that event as well. And I really like this discussion. Since I have the floor, I'm going to add a couple things. This is a great discussion. The commissioners there for the council to use. Once we hire the new city manager, and I'm kind of going through a process right now, starting that process with our directors to kind of look at the strategic goals and objectives for the city that needs to be carried on to the council. So in the February and March is scheduling the strategic plan session with the council to get these discussions kind of more on paper and outline. And as you have this discussion, you have some future discussions. We can get these goals and objectives down on paper, so we can have kind of a plan to achieve that throughout the year. And it may be a 1, 2, 3, 5-year plan to achieve some of these things. If the general plan, which I strongly encourage a general plan, be at least get it on paper, so we're trying to start to figure out how to fund that. It may take some time, but our general plan is outdated. It needs updating. It should be a topic of discussion. It is a big dollar amount, but until we kind of get it down on paper and start talking about it, and that is a great goal for planning commission. It's going to take a lot of time, a lot of public meetings as you go through that type of process. So your commission is going to be very important to this council, and we'll do what we can to tie all that together.
Thank you. Councilman Bells, was the, and other former members of the commission, what's your sense of the adequacy of funding for the supporting the commission?
Are you referencing the funding for training?
Overall, for whatever objectives you're trying to achieve.
I don't think that there's any funding allocated, other than I think it was a $3,000 amount for training for the commissioners to go to the League of Cities training.
Interesting.
I'll have to follow up with you on that. I don't know what's in the budget this year. I do strongly encourage training, especially with new commissioners, so we can kind of provide them the tools they need to make those decisions that they're faced with.
What sort of staff, pardon me, what sort of staff support, direct staff support do they receive?
As a planning commissioner, you have community development director, which the position is vacant currently, but filled with a consultant. Myself kind of overseeing that, and then we have an admin assistant in the office.
So you said consultants, so there's funding for consultants?
We have a planning consultant currently that is assisting with the planning projects until we fill the community development director position.
So the primary staff support is the community development director. Okay, well, that'll be something to consider in the next budget.
So to kind of give you a picture of what goes on in that, in the planning commission environment, somebody wants to, let's say there's a warehouse and they want to use it, they want to convert it to use it as an office building, and the zone allows them as a conditional use to convert it over into office space. They've got to get permission to do that. And so that staff works on that project, prepares a staff report. There's a planning commission meeting. It comes in front of the planning commission. There's a discussion. They talk about how it's going to impact the area, the neighborhoods, et cetera. And then there's a vote made on it as to whether the applicant, can change this warehouse over to an office use or not change it over to an office use and keep it as a warehouse. So that's kind of the format of it. So there's not really like a I think the planning commissioners get paid $15 a meeting, I think, something like that. So they don't really they can't initiate anything. The planning commission doesn't initiate anything on its own. We initiate it for them. So like if we tell them we want to do a parking study, then we need to determine what that costs. If there is a cost, et cetera, then that's funding that might be allocated towards that. Or if there's some other type of study or something.
So all of the funding is ad hoc on a project by project basis?
Pretty much.
That's interesting. I think I'm picking up on as I think about it more deeply, I'm picking up on Councilmember Gilchrist and Councilmember Cavoli's suggestion of this topic. And big picture, at least in my mind, is that the city needs a rudder, someone at the tiller in terms of the direction of the city, particularly in terms of economic growth. And that's something to think about as we come up with this next budget, and whether ad hoc is the most efficient way or there should be some discretionary funding with the input of the economic development or something like that, so that things don't get slowed down by having each item run by the city council.
That is a good discussion for strategic planning. What are the goals, priorities of the council, and then we can start tying, implementing, how do we get those goals and priorities implemented.
To the chair.
Agreed. Please.
So we can maybe need to wrap this up a little bit. Let's just go, I'm going to repeat this again. In the past, there was an adversarial relationship with development and with staff and with the planning commission. The commission has specific things, land use, zoning, specific things that comes to it that are dictated by a charter that says it goes through a planning and goes through. And in the past, the planning commission was not utilized. I know when Brad and I were on it, we were utilized quite often. It's a voluntary position. Basically, I think there is a minimal, if anything. I think we didn't get paid anything, but I don't even remember any cost for an ad hoc. It was all volunteer. Everything in there that I remember was volunteer. I don't know if anybody can relate to that, or if you can, Brad, but again, just to maybe move forward, I think what we need to do is when we decide on a new city manager, when the city manager gets their economic development agent, because they're the one that actually is the direct staff to the planning, then we encourage them or to use the planning commission for what it was designed for.
Through the chair, if I may, real quick, I'll finish. So the roadmap is made. We just need to make sure the map is used. And so once we get all positions filled within staff, hopefully it'll get used and we can move forward and it can work like it was designed.
Please.
I also believe that we had already established a budget for this, and the city of Marysville has been working on this. We don't have our, what's that? Before the general plan updates. So I know that we were working on, and I don't know where it is in the budget, to actually start the general plan updates. As I have been following and asking questions for 3 years, and I know that we were making progress financially, especially after the audit, et cetera. And so I know that paying for a complete general plan update has been on the radar in city staff. And so it's how you prioritize what elements or chapters of the general plan, and it's most beneficial, especially during the COVID period. Medical Arts District, for instance. I mean, there's just several, so it'll be easy for us to prioritize, but I know that our budget already has or should have funds in it already for this exact purpose.
This is another discussion. This is budget and general plan discussion, really a little bit out of this planning discussion. But I think that's when we'll come back with this, is during budget time.
Yeah, we've got streets decomposing into gravel, and so many issues, and we don't, these all bear mention. Code enforcement needs to be enhanced. Property values suffer because of lack of it. There's so much. This fits into the discussion, though. It's important. You can't forget tomorrow because of today's very specific and trying problems. But that strategic planning thing happens in March. I witnessed the last one, and I went through the budget, and there's so many items, so many goals, I couldn't figure it out. I mean, you can see there's a lot of goals, and that's wonderful. We need to have short lists and then achieve those goals to have credibility. Well, this is a good conversation. Are we, any more comments? Without further ado, do we have a public comment at this stage?
At this time, there are no public speakers, Mayor.
Okay. Let me go back to the agenda here. Okay. Let's see, council comments. Councilmember Belza.
Yeah, I hope everybody, staff, and everybody in the city had a good holiday season, Christmas and New Year's, et cetera, et cetera. I will make a couple comments. I've had people from the general public reach out to me on a couple different things, not in a negative way, in any way, shape, or form, but just kind of a concerned way, or making observations and comments. One, and this is maybe something that we can look into, I'm not exactly sure, but a couple comments on the amount of trash piling up along the 12th Street Highway 20 corridor going towards the dump. I don't know if there's a way that we can coordinate with maybe Yuba County Sheriff's Office, if there's, community service people that have to go out and do it, or if there's a way we can get on a list of getting some team out there. I know staff, we're probably pretty limited with the public works guys, or if there's a volunteer group. I know Stay Love does a lot of stuff, but it's just, I've had a couple comments on it. And then other comments that I've had from the general public lately is, and I'm sure Chief Sachs is diligently going after it, but just to make it aware, is the amount of little spot camping sites that are popping up around. There's one, I think, right when you come off of the 5th Street Bridge into town, on the right-hand side, there's 3 or 4 tents there. And so just comments people are making, just passing them on. But all in all, I think that we're moving forward, and I'm excited for 2021. Thankful that 2020 is over. And yeah, anyhow, just some things to think about, be aware of. Thank you.
Councilmember Gilchrist.
Happy New Year, and apparently Santa Claus came to Marysville, and so thank you, Chief Sachs and the fire department. The residents, I got phone calls from the residents, they were very happy.
Councilmember Hudson.
I have no real comment, but I think just for, I don't know if you missed these accidentally on the bottom of page 2, which is, community reports, correspondence, the manager report, and us. I have no comment.
I have no comments, except just maybe the answer to that, and Gene can probably agree, confirm. We have an agreement with Recology, and I believe their portion of it is from them. Well, I don't know if it was all the way into town or if it was the 22nd or 17th, but we have an agreement. Part of their agreement is that they maintain that. So I think it's a matter of reminding them. So other than that, I have no comments.
We're out of order here. My only comment will be that I welcome and happy to see these requests for discussion without action, particularly this discussion we had on the Planning Commission. In the future, I want to have focused discussions on the homelessness issue, particularly what's termed the vagrancy side of it. and Ellis Lake, but we need more data so that we can have reports and have a more informed discussion on those topics, and the streets. I'm just talking about the things I heard most on the campaign trail and saw. Okay, I'm a little bit out of order here and I apologize for that, but committee reports. Do we have any committee reports? How about council correspondence, Madam Clerk?
No correspondence for this meeting, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, now we're back in line here. I knew that. No report from the city manager today. Next meeting announcement. The next regular meeting will be held on Tuesday, January 19th at 6 p.m. And we have a notice to the public, City Clerk.
After the closed session, the city council will leave council chambers and the meeting will be adjourned by operation of law due to lack of a quorum. If there is any reportable closed session action, a report will be made at the beginning of the next regular council meeting. I ask that after closed session item descriptions are read by the mayor, that all members of council, applicable consultants, and staff join the closed session meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to adjourn to a closed session. We're going to take a 5-minute break. Before we adjourn to closed session, do we have public comment?
At this time, there are no speakers.
Okay, now we will adjourn to closed session. Councilman Hudson, you're saving me.
We can show you how. Live streaming can be simple and not expensive. You may already have the basic tools right in your hand. But it's more than just pushing live to communicate effectively. That's where Yuba-Sutter.live and Live Streaming YS on Facebook can help you. Make it easy to jump in. Just give us a call at 530-301-2931 or visit our website, www.yuba-sutter.live. Yuba-Sutter's home of live streaming and live streaming tools, live streaming services, technology, and training. Live streaming is Yuba-Sutter.live. All aboard!